Hey everyone, how you doing? This is the fireside chat with Jake. Jake, can you hear me? Is it? Can you
Hello, can you hear me now?
There we go. Hello. There we are, Jake.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. So nice to have you with us.
It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's the end of the day on Tuesday. Is it got? Have you got thunder and lightning where you are at the moment?
No, no. I mean, it's a bit overcast, but there's some sunshine too. So
Oh, we've had quite a lot of lightning and thunder down here, and it's really nice to work to. I find it's quite soothing. I don't know, some people find it terrifying, but I quite enjoy a bit of lightning and thunder.
very atmospheric. Yes.
Yes, definitely. So thanks for joining us tonight. So we're going to kind of have a just a bit of a casual chat really about sumo in general and the Sumo Academy specifically. This small fireside chat is part of our kind of wider C++ programming course, which we're running in parallel with this. This event is open to anyone in the Into Games Discord, but really we're kind of focusing on programming routes into the sector here, and a big part of that now is Sumo's Academy, which is doing just some incredible stuff. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of just kick off with a little about what who you are and what you're doing over at Sumo at the moment.
Okay. Cool. So yes, I'm Jake, and my title is Director of Education Partnerships at Sumo Digital. But on a practical level, what I do from day to day is run the Sumo Academy here. So I'm based in Sheffield, inside the Sumo Sheffield studio, which is out towards Meadowhall in Sheffield. And we've got a unit here that I'm sat now in a classroom with, some of my apprentices have gone home, some of them still here, where we sort of work and learn as part of the apprenticeship.
Awesome. And can you just tell us a little bit about the kind of, I guess, the journey to the level 7 apprenticeship, because you were a big part of putting that level 7 apprenticeship together. And when I kind of say level 7, I mean, it's probably I'm so used to talking about apprenticeships, I completely forget that they're a kind of a strange beast with lots of different kind of odd sounding words and phrases and things attached to them that probably need to be explained a little bit from scratch. But currently there are a few different games apprenticeship standards. There used to be none at all, but now there are a few ones that are relevant, and probably the most relevant is the Level 7 Games Programmer, which you Jake pretty much drove through over a period of kind of year and a half, 2 years. It'd be good to kind of understand a little bit just specifically about that, like what just the very basic, what is an apprenticeship, and what is the level 7 games program, what does level 7 even mean?
Okay, cool. So what's an apprenticeship? An apprenticeship is a job with training. The apprenticeships are something that companies like Sumo, they sort of pay a certain tax, a certain levy tax, which the government collects and then allows us to reuse to fund apprenticeships and to sort of bring new talent into our industries. But you can only do that where a standard exists. So apprenticeship standards are something that you have to create as an industry, working together. Different studios in the games industry help to create the Level 7 Game Programmer apprenticeship standard, and you work with a body called IFATE, so the Institute for Apprenticeships, and develop standards that represent a particular role within an industry. And yeah, as you said, up until sort of the last year or so, there were no standards which related specifically to development roles in the games industry. And that's something that the games industry was keen to do something about, but hadn't really had the time and input to sort of make that work. So my background is, my original background is from the games industry. I used to work for a company called Gremlin Graphics back in the 1990s, which was a sort of 8-bit, 16-bit games company based in Sheffield. I also worked for Sumo Digital back when they were a much smaller company, just based in one building. But in between, I went into academia and I taught for 10 years on the game programming courses at Sheffield Hallam University, where I taught both on the undergraduate game programming courses. So that's in terms of levels, that goes up to level 6. And the postgraduate, so the master's level game programming courses, which are level 7. So the apprenticeship specification that we created then is a level 7 specification, which principally is about sort of targeting graduates of of courses which aren't games courses. So, mathematicians, physicists, computer scientists, perhaps, who are interested in sort of transferring their skill set to our industry. And the level 7 game programmer does that by sort of introducing them to the kind of programming skills and development skills that you would need to be successful as a game programmer in our industry. So, yeah, I mean, that's the sort of background. Why did you decide to implement apprenticeships? I think in our industry, it has been recognised more recently that we have some issues we need to address in terms of diversity. So, particularly, I suppose, on the game programming side, having taught on a course for 10 years, it was very, very male dominated. And I think we're very keen in the industry to address underrepresentation where that is reflected, in the UKI report. So the UKI diversity report that came out a couple of years ago, and there was a new one in the last year. They show that there are certain areas we need to work on, and I think apprenticeships provide a great way of doing that.
Mm. And so, I mean, the different levels, we were just saying this is a level 7. The different levels there go right down to kind of level 3. I don't think they do level 2s anymore, but level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6, and they represent, let's say, different stages of, or can be equated to different stages of kind of traditional schooling, like kind of A levels or first year
level 2 is A level,
or whatever.
and then
yeah. And kind of go up from that point. And obviously level 7 is relatively high, but it feels you kind of probably had to create level 7 first to get the buy-in from the sector, and then there's a potential to maybe create some kind of earlier stage levels, as there's some proof there that this works, and this is a truly good pathway to get into the sector. You have also implemented some things to kind of alleviate and help that as well at Sumo, because you guys are leaps ahead of every other studio, being the first major studio to actually implement this properly. And of course, you've done years and years of thinking about this. There's a bit before potentially the level 7 games program that you guys have set up as well. So the what's that called? So it's the kind of the bit before you get told you're an apprentice. There's a potential to learn about C++ and
yeah.
grow
So
into
I mean,
apprenticeship.
over the last couple of years, we've run various boot camps, for want of a better word, in different guises. And the sort of most recent form of that is our diversity internship training program. So that is run as a positive action. So, where we were talking about addressing underrepresentation, where there is evidence of underrepresentation for a particular role, you are under under an activity that's sort of framed as positive action. You are allowed to target that towards specific underrepresented groups. So we have the diversity internship program, which recruits candidates from a range of different backgrounds, but particularly, as we're saying, in terms of addressing the sort of gender makeup of games courses, but also in terms of ethnic minority groups and other underrepresented groups as well. And it provides those groups with, I suppose, an opportunity to receive some training and support that perhaps they wouldn't have had access to being from those groups in the first place. So, part of recognizing that underrepresentation happens is realizing that people have different experiences and are pushed in different directions as part of their education as they come through the education system. And not everybody has the same access to the kind of support and training that might lead into ultimately getting onto an apprenticeship program. So the diversity internship training program is sort of providing some of that support. And students have the opportunity for 6 weeks to work in C++, get training and support in C++, and develop a bit of a portfolio demo that they can then sort of take forward to the apprenticeship application process. It is independent from the apprenticeship application process, and applicants are expected to apply just like anybody else applies to the apprenticeship externally. But we had, a good success rate last year. So 5 out of 6 of the diversity interns went on to join the apprenticeship scheme at the end of that program. So
Wow.
I think that was it was a good result for those
That's
students.
brilliant. And were those with the as part of that kind of diversity program, were they equally from kind of degrees that were like computer science or maths, or had they come from other backgrounds?
So we had
educational wise.
I mean, certainly in terms of degree backgrounds, we had a wide range. So over the history of this, we've had people who've done degrees as diverse as fashion business management. We've got sort of marine biology. We've got design engineering. We've got physicists. We've got mathematicians. So there is, I suppose, a wider spread than we'd originally anticipated in terms of the appeal of this. Which is great, but we've also got Bradley on the course, who was a next gen student who has come from a sort of level 5 qualification. So he hasn't done a degree at all, and he's been able to, as part of various programs we've done, show that he's got the kind of skill set required to do that level 7 qualification without having previously done a level 6. So it is possible. By and large, most of the current cohorts are from a degree background of some kind in the first place.
And what? So I mean, if somebody, let's say they so we can talk about dates in a moment in terms of when the next intakes might be and what that might look like. But if somebody was had a year to prepare for their application to the next bunch of programmer apprentices, and they kind of they had some programming experience, they'd started using C++, they might have done some kind of boot camp like the one that we've put together, so kind of a really intensive introduction to that, and programmed their first game using C++ on Unreal, and they had a year to get ready. What would you kind of recommend they do?
I mean, you can't really do too much C++, in my opinion. So certainly, I think if you've got candidates who've had a bit of experience with C++ in Unreal, it's worth having a go with some frameworks which are outside of Unreal as well. I think it's very easy to, I suppose, get drawn in by the amazing graphics and incredible experiences that you can create with an engine like Unreal. But sometimes you can spend more time making it look great rather than actually learning the coding, which is the core skill set that we're interested in from game programmers. So we usually recommend working with a pure C++ framework. In fact, we even provide one. So on our website, you can get access to the Play Buffer framework, which is just a single header library in C++, and it means that you can sort of get up and running, creating games like we were creating in the 1990s very quickly using C++. But it means that you're focusing all of your time on understanding the syntax and structure of the language and getting used to how C++ works, familiarizing yourself with compilers and errors and all the kinds of things that I suppose you need to really be happy and comfortable with to be a game programmer, because the job of a game programmer is about doing that all day, every day. And you really need to become fluent in C++ at the end of the process.
And what about kind of math skills? What should be working on around that specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, math skills are very relevant to game programming. It's unusual for game programmers to not use mathematics at all in their role, but it's not necessarily true that every programmer uses maths to the same degree. We certainly have specialists who will do certain kind of physics, for example. We've got people who specialize in physics programming, and will be very comfortable with doing the mathematics behind physics. But if you're involved in UI programming, for example, you might not do as much mathematics. But nonetheless, we would expect everybody to have a good grounding in vectors and matrices and trigonometry and that kind of thing. It's a relatively small area of mathematics that you need to know as a game programmer, but you just need to be very familiar with it again and to be able to use it very comfortably as part of your day-to-day job. So yeah, I mean, I would recommend anybody who perhaps, if they haven't done maths since their school days, then it's very much worth sort of picking up a Udemy course or something in mathematics and going through that to sort of brush up on their mathematical skills, particularly with respect to vectors and matrices and that kind of thing.
Awesome. And do you, within the kind of apprenticeship learning itself, or the kind of pre-apprenticeship kind of academy, do you do any kind of mathematic teaching within that, or do you just kind of, there's an expectance that they're already at a good maths level before you should even bother applying for any of that?
So in the diversity internship program, we wouldn't specifically cover much mathematics unless there was a specific sort of gap in somebody's knowledge there. I mean, I actually think the majority of this year's diversity interns do have A levels in mathematics already, which is really impressive. I mean, that's not normally the case of students on undergraduate game programming courses, to be honest. But we just had really high standard of applicants for the diversity program this year. So I mean, that's great if you've got it, and we would tend to see that sort of candidates would naturally tend towards taking on tasks that might involve more or less mathematics depending on their prior experience. So we had a candidate here last year who was sort of doing Verlet integration on in her first week at work, but that's not everybody's idea of something they want to do on their first day. And there are certainly other people that are needing that run up into their mathematics. So we provide that on the apprenticeship. We teach 2D mathematics and 3D mathematics and familiarize the apprentices with using vectors and matrices and maths libraries in a way which I think does ease them into it and give them a fundamental understanding in how these things work. So that's very much part of the apprenticeship program and what it's teaching.
And what does a kind of typical day or week look like for a game dev apprentice at Sumo? How much are they in the studio? How much are they in the kind of training space?
So the apprenticeship here at Sumo, because we are our own provider, then it takes a different kind of format to other apprenticeships. So I mean, the traditional model of an apprenticeship is that you work for, say, 4 days a week for an employer, where you undertake a job, which, where you would be doing tasks that employer needs you to do, but you would be spending 1 day a week on average, perhaps training off-site at a university or a training provider, where you were learning skills that were developing you along that sort of career pathway a bit further. There is sort of, and you can see that model in all sorts of areas, like if you're trained to be an accountant, that might be a traditional model today. But in game programming, part of the problem we have is that it's very hard to give somebody a job on their first day where they are a game programmer, because on their first day they don't really know a lot about game programming. So there are different ways of trying to address that. The way that we do that is by having the Sumo Academy. And the Sumo Academy is developing sort of small-scale products in its own right. So, Sumo Digital as a studio, we're sitting in the same site where the latest sort of Little Big Planet and Sackboy games were developed. But our apprentices aren't jumping straight into those games. They are given small-scale products that they can work on to develop their skills, where there's a lot less risk involved, and they can get up to speed with smaller code frameworks and smaller games, and have the experience of shipping those games as well. So we shipped a game called Zool Redimensioned last year, which is a remake of a 1990s game. And that was shipped on Steam, and that gave that group of students then a great platform, an understanding of how a whole product comes together, but on a small scale. And then they all went off and sort of did placements then at the end of their apprenticeship with the big game teams, and they've all stayed on and continued their employment with Sumo Digital afterwards. So if I come back to your original question then, about what a day looks like, I don't think even here it's necessarily a case of it's 1 day a week we're studying and 4 days a week they're working. Here it's very much intermingled. So, the things they might be working on a daily basis are as much as part of their training as the sort of formal lecture or tutorial exercise that we might do. So we certainly, we do have presentations. So I've got a big TV here in the office, and I'll stop and, everybody will work on the same thing for a certain period of time. We'll go through slides. We'll do some exercises at the end of that that illustrate the concepts that we're doing. But then the team will sort of return back to working on the games that they're working on afterwards. So we've got one team here that's working on taking Zool Redimensioned to the PlayStation 4. They're adding like a multiplayer mode to that, so sort of some party games that weren't in the original version, but then they're also going to ship it on the PlayStation 4. That's a brilliant experience. And then we've got another team who are developing their own game engine. So this is writing their own game engine from scratch in C++ for a new sort of indie game that we're working on. And that's a second project that's going on at the same time. So it's very much like a small studio with lectures drop in on an occasional basis.
Oh well, it must be absolutely fantastic experience for those guys that are in there. Did they kind of from the bigger studio? I guess the members of the programming team can pop in during that learning experience. Do they kind of interact with them within the learning environment as well?
Yes. So, we have people sort of pop in and say hello and give us insights into the games that they're working on. I mean, we're lucky in that we actually have access to some of those. So, for example, if you take Snake Pass and Spider, they are two games that were developed here in Sumo Sheffield, and they belong to Sumo. The IP is Sumo, so we're able to use those as teaching resources. You'll see Spider sort of turn up in some of our play buffer resources, and we can look at how those games were developed. We've got access to the project archives. We got videos of the team members talking about their experiences on the game. And they, feed in directly to the learning experience that people have here. But the main point at which the experience of being with the rest of the studio comes in is when, at the end of the apprenticeship, they have a 3-month experience in which they go on to the game teams. So, they will literally join one of those game teams and be given tasks on a AAA project to work on for those 3 months. And then that ultimately will form part of the assessment that the apprenticeship. So the endpoint assessment will ideally be based on something they've done on those projects. Not always possible, because sometimes things are too secret. If you're working on a game that hasn't been announced, then we're not even allowed to show the examiners what's going on. Then we can't use that as part of the assessment. But by and large, we believe we will be able to do that, and that's our plan, basically.
Fantastic. So when's the kind of next intake date? I guess for the certainly for the diversity kind of pre-apprenticeship bootcamp, and then for your next round of apprentices.
So the diversity pre-apprenticeship bootcamp, the application process for that has finished, and the diversity interns will be starting next week. So they will begin their sort of 6-week supported journey. But the actual apprenticeships themselves is only just opened. So applications for the apprenticeships opened at the beginning of the month. And if you visit our website, sumoacademy.com, then you can see the whole process on there. But I mean, if you look at that process, perhaps your students would get an idea of the expectations in terms of the overall assessment process. So, we will typically look at, all the applicants, and if we, feel that it's a good application, then we'll invite that applicant to take part in the assessment process. We'll give them access to some resources. So we have like a sort of corporate Udemy account. We typically sign up anybody who's taking part of this process to that corporate Udemy account, which gives them access to, all the training courses on whatever you'd like to do on Udemy. But we direct them towards some certain study materials. And then as part of the application process, there are a number of assessments that are given that relate to that. So we'll do a general C++ test, which is just a sort of HackerRank type test, if people have done those. So completing coding online, and it can sort of automatically mark those. And then we have a sort of test where we send out a game framework. So we give people, the starting point for a game. And a list of features that we're interested in them having a go at, and they get a chance. Sort of, it's run sort of over a weekend or any 2 consecutive days. They have the opportunity to just sort of work on that for 2 days and add features to it as part of the assessment. So, based on those, we then invite people to a final interview. This time we're planning on holding the final interviews at Sheffield Hallam University. So we're going to borrow a teaching lab from them there, and we'll get the students working together in teams to do a bit of a game jam there too. So, that in itself, I think, will be a really valuable experience, a chance to sort of do some coding with other members of a team and get some feedback from us there live on the day as well. So ultimately, we're taking on 10 people into the apprenticeship again this year. So, this year's cohort were 10, and next year's cohort will be 10. But that means we end up with having sort of 20 apprentices for a sort of overlap period. So the apprenticeship lasts more than a year. It's about 18 months in total. So they sort of do a year on C++, 3 months on Unreal, and then a 3 months placement. That's the kind of structure. So yeah, we will actually have 20 apprentices on site come January until about sort of March time next year.
Oh, fantastic! I mean, once you've finally got to interview, are there any other kind of things that you're looking for other than the skills that are there? So any kind of soft skills or anything like that at all that you'd recommend kind of working on?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly, it's really important as a programmer to be able to communicate. It's important to be able to communicate with people outside of your discipline and explain any constraints or, implications of taking a particular decision. But it's also really important to be able to communicate with the other coders on your team, organize and plan together. So, that's definitely something we are looking for, is, how teams can work together. But also, we are interested in recruiting a team, not 10 people who are identical. So we are interested in how they fit together as a group and how people may, work well together in that group environment in the final stage. So, I mean, all those kind of soft skills become very important at that point. But it's kind of hard to, because we're not looking for 10 leaders, because that wouldn't necessarily work in the context. But so, we are interested in leadership, but not everybody needs to be a leader.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, I'm just if anybody has any kind of further big questions here, do pop them in the live panel chat. And I think we had one from Ben about how the apprenticeship is structured and assessed, and is the training done externally. I think we've kind of pretty much answered that through some of the stuff that you've already been talking about, Jake. We had a bit of a catch-22 question. What if you don't strictly have degrees in English and maths outside core skills, but made up for it with a master's degree? Could you still potentially get onto an apprenticeship if struggling to get into the industry? I guess
if you don't have what in English and maths. So the English and maths, the sort of the only qualifications you have to have in English and maths are GCSE, and I think you need a grade 5 or what would have been a C in the sort of old grading. So unfortunately, there's no way around that as a prerequisite for apprenticeships because that's stipulated by government. So even if we saw somebody that had a master's degree in something else, if they didn't have those GCSEs in maths and English, we're not allowed to take them on. But beyond that, you don't have to have an A-level in maths, for example, and certainly, we're very interested in sort of seeing talented people who come from all different kinds of backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some questions about the boot camp, the kind of fast trackers boot camp specifically, just about whether that's, I guess, suitable for this particular apprenticeship, and you would still have to pass the coding test before getting an interview, I think, for anything, just to prove that you could code at that level. And I think certainly for this fast trackers boot camp that we're running at the moment, it's probably it's the introduction to C++. So I think listening to Jake around where you need to get to at the probably the next apprenticeship round next year, and working on your mathematics skills and your C++ skills to the point where you can pass that test is going to be your priority. And I guess anyone can have a go at passing that test, right, Jake? So and seeing whether that's something they can do. So by all means, if that's something you want to have a go at, then please do. We would encourage that, just to at least to understand what that test entails, certainly, and that'll be worth looking at. So definitely do that. But for anyone on the fast trackers bootcamp, I think I said right at the beginning of that course that Into Games is kind of with you for the long haul. So we'll support you throughout the next 12 months until the next round, and hopefully give you a little bit more support or direction in terms of getting ready for that next kind of application process to the apprenticeship process. But I think it needs to be said that the level 7 games program is hard, right, Jake? I mean, it's not an easy course of action. I mean, it's you need to be ready for that. I guess it's not a beginner entry route kind of thing.
I would say if you have the right aptitude, then you don't necessarily have to have gone too far down the road. I mean, it entirely depends. So one of our students from last year, Tokazo, I mean, he'd done a design engineering degree, and as part of that, he'd done a bit of programming, and it's fairly common as part of the kind of applicants that we get to the course, is that people haven't done C++ before at all when they actually enter the process, but they've done some other sort of programming language. So they've done Python or Java or a bit of C# or something like that. I mean, Emma, who did a fashion business degree, and I mean, she'd been doing Python as part of a job, but it was relatively routine sort of work she was doing with Python. She'd never written a game before when she came onto the program. So I think, both of those candidates, Toxo and Emma, they just had huge potential. And once they started to pick up C++ and learn with it was obvious that their progress was really fast. So, what we try and judge in the application process is not how far somebody's got, but how far they could get. So if we see somebody that's got a low starting level, but has moved a long way through the application process, and bearing in mind, our application process takes a month. If we can see that progress, then that means a lot to us. So yeah, we're not looking for the finished article, but equally, you need to have probably done enough programming in another programming language to feel fairly comfortable with programming in general.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think hopefully, certainly on the Fast Trackers course, I think we've said, we'd encourage everyone to apply to that just to see how far you get down the line. And maybe you might make it through by the sounds of it, which would be amazing. Also with an eye that this is something that will happen again next year, and to be ready for that, and be ready and fully understand what that process is going to be like. So, fantastic. Well, I'm probably gonna wrap up there. Sorry. So Ben's just popped up a question. What ways do you recommend of showing you have potential?
So even to submit an application, there is a tutorial you have to complete. I think, it's a tutorial, run with it. Often we're impressed by people that go a bit further, do a bit more.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Nice one. Thank you so much for popping in and giving us a really, really clear overview of the apprenticeship process and just the fantastic work you guys are doing there. And it's so amazing to know that there is this opportunity that's going to come around pretty much every year with multiple entry points. So I really hope that everyone's listening here who wants to go down a programmer route, or is has been taking part on the boot camp, or or just is interested in that space, definitely gives it a go and tries to make that application. So amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Jake. That's been brilliant. And
Very welcome.
Look forward to I'm sure speaking to you again very soon.
Brilliant, and good luck to everybody with their C++ journeys. It can start very small, but who knows? You could be writing, Unreal 7 engine in 10 years' time.
Yeah. Amazing. Nice one. Thanks, Jake.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.